I'm sorry, you should start, not me. Go ahead. Let's do it again. Let's start over, yeah?
Oh, Ted, we're actually live right now. This is Ted Lasso, the
Oh, it's
former
live?
Tottenham... Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. How was I supposed to know that? I thought that said live.
Howdy, everyone. I am Josh from TrimTv, and TrimTv is where me and my guests talk about TV series that have ended to see if it's worth your time or if you should trim it from your watch list. On today's episode, we are talking about the dramedy Ted Lasso, and my guest for today is my friend Zach. Zach, my fellow Diamond Dog, welcome to our TED Talk. I am excited to have you here to talk soccer and all things Ted Lasso, so welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh. I'm excited to be here too. It's one of my favorite shows, probably at this point my favorite show of all time. So I'm very excited to talk Ted Lasso and soccer and kind of get into the show with you.
Do you want to talk about it?
Yes, I do.
Diamond Dogs, mount up! Oh, never fucking mind.
Okay, awesome. So I'm not like I would say a medium soccer fan. I don't really follow it. I'll certainly play it if it's an option. I do have FIFA on the PS5, but I don't really follow it. I know Messi just signed with Miami. So how are you coming to the show as a soccer fan? Is it something you liked? Is it something you're like, ooh, the soccer in it is kind of not really there?
Well, so I think it's important to first of all discuss how the show, like related to soccer, how the show even came to be. Back in 2013, I believe, 2012, 2013, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
NBC picked up English Premier League soccer to show in the US. And they started an ad, right? You know, to introduce Ted Lasso as the coach of Tottenham.
Hey, how you doing? This is Ted Lasso. I'm the new head coach of the Tottenham Hotspurs, and I'd like to talk to the Queen, please.
You know, one of the big four teams in England. Well, big 5, 6. I mean, you know, it kind of depends what you're including: Arsenal, Chelsea, all that stuff.
Right.
And so I thought it was an entertaining commercial. I remember laughing at it, you know, thinking I enjoyed it. And so the fact that this whole idea started as a way to advertise soccer, you know, in the U.S., I thought it was important to kind of get the soccer bits right. And they did okay at that. It's probably the one aspect of the show, at least in the first season for sure, is kind of lacking the soccer. The bits where they actually show the soccer definitely feel a little stilted, a little forced. It doesn't really feel like you're actually watching soccer at any point. They got better about it. Season 2 was much better, where it kind of felt like it flowed a little more.
Because they actually hired a soccer player to come in season 2 and say, hey, we need more soccer like in this show, and it needs to be correct. So it is great that you're picking up on that, because it sounds like it was money well spent by them.
Yeah, I mean, because I've watched soccer fairly religiously for the last 20 years, and I grew up in a soccer family. My brother actually tried out for a team in England at one point. My dad coached for 30 odd years. I played growing up. It's just been something that's been a part of my family since the day, you know, since as long as I can remember. So it's definitely something that I've been around, that I've watched a lot of, and you could definitely see, you know, in the first season where it just, you know, I mean, it's obviously a character dramedy first, and kind of a soccer show like 10th. I mean, it's definitely not the most important aspect of it by any means. It's more the setting completely of everything, you know. But it was nice that, yeah, I mean, and I didn't know that they brought in somebody specifically for that reason, but you could tell. I mean, it was definitely improved. The players felt like they were kind of flowing on the field more, and like, and I always thought it was interesting too that that Danny.
I would like to see a tulip. You mean tulip fields? No, just one tulip. An entire field will be incredibly overwhelming.
The guy that plays Danny actually played professional soccer in Mexico for a few years. And you can kind of tell, and you can kind of tell when you're watching, you know, that he is clearly the person out there that has the most idea as far as like the best idea as far as what they're doing, and you know, controlling the ball and taking shots and all that. The scene when he does in the first season when he does the game where they kick it off the crossbar, him and Jamie, like it definitely felt like I was watching an actual soccer player kick a ball, as opposed to what you're watching a lot of the rest of the first season with soccer, where it's like I'm clearly watching actors act at playing soccer rather than watching soccer players, whatever. So, but
I just finished this up. I just finished this up, and as like that medium soccer fan, really more of a TV fan, like towards the end, I could not tell that these people were not soccer players. Like they were doing some fancy footwork that I'm like, oh, like they went to like some sort of training camp or something, because they didn't look out of place. I know, at least in my experience, for like some of these hockey shows or movies, like you just watch it and you're like, oh, this is an actor. This person has never been on skates. But I didn't get any of that sort of feeling.
Right. Yeah. But, it feels like it should be easier to demonstrate soccer, as part of a TV show than hockey, because being on ice versus being on a field running, are two completely different things. But they're definitely, like, I remember watching it with my wife, Amanda, and we would be watching in the later season, in second and third season, especially in the third season, where they would, show something happening on the field, and, a player would make a move, make a dribble that I would go, oh, that was actually a really nice move, or, oh, like good touch. There's one part where I think it was Bumper Catch.
Bumper Catch, you're Swiss?
Yeah. Look at me.
Oh, no, you're right. Yeah.
They pass the ball in the air to him, and he traps it down with his foot, and he stops it. And I went, oh, that's a really nice first touch. And it's entirely possible that it was just kind of all like a very slow, like they just kind of tossed it to him gently. But they made it look like he actually could make a professional trap and kind of bring it down and then play it from there. The show evolved in a lot of ways, and that was definitely one of them with the on-field action and with the off-field stuff too. I mean, it went from the first season where kind of a lot of the off-field stuff felt very secondary to, other than like watching how these players are adjusting to a new coach and, new manager and the idea of being relegated and all that. But as far as transfers go, as far as that sort of stuff and the off-field stuff, the front office stuff, it was interesting to see that it felt like they got more into that on the soccer side as well, of, like making sure that they were a little more accurate as far as like how would a ownership, how would a front office run, and how would, because it's so much different from American sports, the way soccer teams do it, as far as the transfer system and as far as getting players and buying players and, who's involved and who has what say.
And despite the number of you here, there is not a single person in this room who has seen Richmond play more than I have. And in all those years, under the stewardship of the previous owner, I've witnessed nothing but profound mediocrity. Am I wrong?
Well, it's a bit,
Am I wrong? Now, Coach Lasso may not have the CV that you all find acceptable, but he does have one thing this club doesn't. A trophy from this millennium. So, like it or not, Richmond are changing the way we do things. And from now on, that way is the Lasso way. We look forward to seeing you all at our next match with Crystal Palace. Thank you so much.
So let's go ahead and let's give a rundown of like what the show is. That's usually about what the first season is.
Now, look here. I respect what you folks in the media do, and my door is always going to be open. All right? You can ask me anything. No topic will be into touch.
All right, one final question.
How about the fellow right there in the second row there? Yeah. I like your glasses.
Oh, thank you. Trent Krim, The Independent. I just want to make sure I have this right. You're an American who's never set foot in England, whose athletic success has only come at the amateur level, a second-tier one at that, and has now been charged with the leadership of a Premier League football club, despite clearly possessing very little knowledge of the game.
You got a question in there, Trent?
Yeah. Is this a fucking joke?
And according to Wikipedia, I have Ted Lasso, an American college football coach, is unexpectedly recruited to coach a fictional English Premier League soccer team, AFC Richmond, despite having no previous experience coaching soccer. The team's owner, Rebecca Welton, hires Lasso, hoping he will fail as a means of extracting revenge on the team's previous owner, her unfaithful ex-husband. However, Ted's charm, personality, and humor begin to win over Rebecca, the team, and those who had been skeptical about his appointments. And I think that's a pretty good summary Wiki has for us.
News from the other side of the Atlantic. AFC Richmond announced the hiring of their new manager, American football coach Ted Lasso.
I will agree that I think this show starts kind of slow, and I can understand people like checking out an episode or two and just being like, this isn't for me. For me, I think it starts to get like really fascinating, really good, something you want to stick with around episode like 5. We have what this is sort of about. We can delve into any storylines you want to talk about or anything you feel like talking about with Ted Lasso.
Yeah, so I definitely feel like that's a good summary. It makes me want to touch on one of the things that I love the most about. So one of my favorite movies growing up is the movie Major League from the early 90s with Wesley Snipes and Charlie Sheen about the baseball team, the Cleveland Indians, Guardians now, but the Cleveland Indians at the time. And the owner wants to move them to Miami, and so she wants them to be really bad. And it's interesting that throughout Ted Lasso, there are direct references to Major League. I mean, beyond the fact that it is the stories are very similar. At the end of the first season, without touching too much on spoilers, but at the end of the first season, there's a direct quote from Ted Lasso that says, "Let's win the whole fucking thing," and that is and it's notable because it's one of the only times in the entire show, out of all 3 seasons, it's like there may be 3 or 4 times that Ted Lasso actually uses a curse word, and that's one of them. And it is a direct quote from Major League, which is the catcher for the team says that exact, we win the whole fucking thing. And in the second season, and so it's a direct quote from Major League. In the second season, there's a scene where they're celebrating. As they're kind of celebrating, 2 of the guys that are on the team that have always kind of gone head to head, Jamie and Roy Kent, Jamie Tart and Roy Kent, are kind of celebrating, and as they're kind of like jumping up together, and then Roy punches. I think he actually headbutts Jamie. So he either punches him or he headbutts him as they're celebrating. And again, that is another reference to Major League, because at the end of Major League, when they're celebrating winning the division series or whatever, winning the pennant, 2 of the characters that had been kind of going, it's Charlie Sheen's character and Corbin Burnson's character. They're celebrating, and Corbin Burnson punches Charlie Sheen in the face, and then they get up and keep celebrating. And so it's another direct reference to Major League. And so it was fascinating to me that they're very clearly, and I don't know whether it was Bill Lawrence, the showrunner, or Sudeikis, who had a lot of, or the guy that plays Coach Beard, and I can't think of his name right now. Yeah, that reference that took that as reference and really kind of worked that into the show. I was actually a little disappointed. I thought that there would be a more overt reference in season 3, and there really wasn't. But it was just notable to me that, like, clearly that had a impact on Ted Lasso. But in general, I think that's a good summary of it.
The storylines. I did know that the storylines where a lot of it was based off Major League, but I didn't know there were so many direct references in the show about Major League. So that was fantastic to learn. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, absolutely. But beyond that, I mean, the first season. So I do agree, and I actually think that every season starts off a little bit slowly, because I think that they spend the first two episodes or so every season really kind of setting the stage for everything that's going to happen that season. And every season, as the whole show, the whole show was obviously started like season 1, and they said from the very beginning, we want this to be 3 seasons, at least with Jason Sudeikis, with Ted Lasso. We want this to be specifically 3 seasons, beginning, middle, and end. And beyond that, each season also kind of works as its own story. Each season has its own beginning, middle, and end. And very much, I think the first couple episodes each season are setting up that beginning. It's setting up what's going to happen through the rest of the season. The first episode of season 1 is introducing all the players, and there's a lot of players. You meet Rebecca, you meet Higgins, you meet Beard, you meet Lasso, you meet Nate, Roy Kent, Jamie Tart, Keeley. You meet all these important characters that are central to the show, and these are obviously kind of the big, and Sam Obasanya, they're kind of the big center people, but also you meet a bunch of other players that become more important as the show goes on and that they get their own storylines. And that's actually one of the things that I love the most. When we talk about storylines, one of the things I love the most is so many characters that get introduced early on get referenced as the show, or get their own development, get their own depth introduced to them as the show goes on. And there's so many callbacks from throughout the series, from episode to episode, from beginning of the season to end of the season, and even from season 1 to the very end of the show in season 3, there are so many callbacks where they introduce something early on, and then later down the line they say, well, we remember this part? Well, we're going to show this again. There's a scene early on where Ted's kind of introducing his philosophy to the players, and I actually didn't realize this at first. My wife told me about it. She pointed it out to me early on, where Ted's kind of introducing his philosophy to the players. And it's one of my favorite episodes, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it's the 3rd episode of season 1. I think it's Trent Krim, the Independent, is the name of the episode. And Ted gives every player in the locker room, he gives them all a book that he thinks would be good for them to read. He thinks would help develop them as people. It's a very good episode. And he gives, Jamie Tart, who is very much a young, very talented, athletic player who is at the time on loan to them from Man City, who are basically, and in real life and in the show, are basically the best team in the Premier League. And, he's on loan to them from Man City. And so Ted Lasso gives him this book, but he's very much kind of a young, showboat, arrogant kid at the time. Yeah. And he, I think he tosses the book away or whatever. And then at the very end of the show, and we won't, but at the very end of the show, he's pulling out, and the book that he has, the piece of paper that he's pulling out, is the book that Ted Lasso gave him at the very beginning. And this is years later, this is 2 seasons later, he has the book and he keeps it with him. And it was such a cool moment that I didn't even realize at first. And it's very easy to miss because they don't really focus on the book. They don't show you that it is the book, but you see it when it's in his hands, and it's the exact same book that he gave him early on. And so they do that so many times throughout the series, where a lot of series, will introduce a character, a lot of TV shows will introduce a character or will introduce a storyline or whatever, and then it just kind of peters out, or gets left hanging or whatever. And it's fine because it's hard to keep track of everything over the course of multiple seasons. But I felt like there weren't very many, and at the moment that I can recall, there weren't any real aspects of that Ted Lasso started and never finished, or didn't reference again, or didn't call back to at some point. I was very impressed with the writers in that the show, one of the things that I love most about the show is that it is very mature, very adult, in that a lot of times, you watch TV shows and dramas build up the drama by often having characters not talk to each other, not communicate, not stand up for themselves or whatever. And Ted Lasso really didn't do that, especially in the first season. They kind of did that a little more in the second and third season they got. But in the first season, one of the things that impressed me most about the show and that I enjoyed the most was that every character felt like a person. They didn't feel like, a lot of times in dramas especially, you get people that feel like a character, but they don't feel like a person.
Character
you
of
sit
a
there and you're
person,
like, yes, yeah, and you sit there and why are you doing this? That's not a thing a real person would do. Why wouldn't you talk to them? Blah blah blah. And Ted Lasso really doesn't do that very much at all, especially in the first season. When people talk, there are very few wasted words. There are very few times where they're talking just. I mean, it's somebody's always trying to accomplish something, to get a point across, to communicate with somebody else. And so that was just one of the things that I really appreciated about the show, is that it felt so much more real in a lot of that than other things did. But I mean, I could just go on and on.
I do think, and one of the things I have on my positive list is I think the show like is bringing in an era of like men talking about their feelings, people going to therapy.
Yeah.
I recommend therapy to
Yeah.
everyone, especially like we all
Absolutely.
went through like a worldwide trauma in 2020. You need to talk to somebody about it. And I do think like hopefully Ted Lasso is ushering in this era where you know, everyone could just be more open with their feelings and like stop being passive aggressive. Like just go work it out, talk it out with somebody.
Hey, Jamie, what would you rather be? A lion or a panda?
Coach, I'm me. Why would I want to be anything else?
I'm not sure you realize how psychologically healthy that actually is.
Right. Well, and what I really appreciate, and you're right, and that's absolutely something that I loved about the show was that they really focus on mental health and talking about things, and you know, but also what I appreciate was that when it came, you know, because that's a central aspect of the second season of their storyline. In the second season is they bring in a therapist, a sports psychologist to talk to the team, and Ted Lasso, who in the entire first season is renowned for just always being positive and always being, you know, I mean, he has a few moments, like he has a panic attack and he has some anxiety, and they introduce the idea that he is dealing with stuff that normal people deal with, and that he does, you know, he's not always 100% positive. But they really touch on in the second season when it comes to mental health stuff of this guy who's always been very much like, I want to try everything and I want to do everything and let's approach everything with a very positive, you know, idea, like, you know, let's approach everything positively. That's kind of how he goes through it. It's like, let's, you know, whatever. Right. And then they bring in the sports psychologist, and Ted Lasso's whole thing is that he wants to help people. He wants to be the one helping people. He wants to make people better versions of themselves. And the idea that they're bringing in somebody else because he's not quite reaching them in the right way, you can see it clearly affects him. But also, and he says as much, he says, you know, they ask him how does he feel about therapy or about therapists or whatever, and he says, you know, healthy anxiety and a healthy dose of Midwestern skepticism, and so they introduce the idea that like he doesn't want to talk to therapists, he doesn't want to talk about this stuff, he doesn't want to open up to people, he doesn't want to really share that deeper part of himself, and it's led to some of the issues that he's going through in his own life that are leading to some of the panic attacks and anxiety that he goes through, is the fact that he doesn't want to talk about this stuff, and he doesn't want to open up, and he doesn't want to share it. You know, he wants people to share with him, but he doesn't want to share with anybody. And as the second season goes on, he develops this rapport with the psychologist that comes in, and it really helps him to process the things that he's going through and to learn healthier ways to deal with them. And he's still, I mean, it's not like he's suddenly better. You know, it's not like an instantaneous, like, oh, he talks to a therapist and everything's great. He still has panic attacks. He still has anxiety. But as the show goes on, he has ways to deal with that. He learns ways to cope and to, you know, process those in a healthy manner rather than just, you know, not knowing what to do and melting down. And so he
shows a lot of growth as well.
He does.
He shows a lot of growth.
And everybody.
Going from like, I am not talking to a therapist to there's several moments where like his life is blowing up and the first thing he does is call the therapist and is like, yo, we need to talk.
Right.
So he does, everybody in the show has just amazing growth. It's one of the best shows I've seen that delves into that growth.
And it should be noted that it literally takes him hitting almost rock bottom for him to actually finally talk to the therapist. You know, he's in the middle of a game and he has an important game and he has a panic attack and he has to leave the field while the game is going on, and the other coaches are forced to take over and they end up winning the game. But, you know, he had to leave and so he has this panic attack, and the end of that episode ends with the therapist going into her office to get something and turning on the lights, and he's laying on her couch realizing that he finally needs help. And it took literally him hitting pretty much rock bottom for him to say, okay, this is what I need. And even after that, he's still resistant to it. The next episode deals with the fact that he goes to the therapist, but he still doesn't want to talk. He still doesn't want to actually, you know, get into the nuts and bolts of going through therapy and seeing somebody for this stuff. And it takes some time for him beyond that to actually open up to her, you know, and go through what's going on in his life and what he needs to talk about.
Awesome. Yeah, that is a great,
yeah,
great summary of that. And honestly, like I said, everyone should go see a therapist. I think at least like once a year, just a mental health check-in is always great. If I had a team psychologist when I was at that level, I would have been like amazing. No, but it definitely would have helped. As somebody who has been like semi-famous for hockey, like the anxiety you face is just unrelenting. So definitely think about that when you're in the crowd and you're like trying to scream horrible things at like people.
Isaac, what the hell happened?
One of our fans said some ignorant shit.
Okay. Okay, what'd they say?
I heard it.
Okay.
He said the F word.
Fuck.
No, the other F word.
Fuck.
If it helps, the fan has been removed. And I apologize for my dad. Sorry, not the time for jokes. Read the room, Leslie.
Like, we hear it. It is not nice. Like, be a good, respectable sports fan is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. The only time you get to talk trash to a player is if you're on the ice with them. That's the only time.
Oh yeah,
Then it's
exactly.
expected. But otherwise, yeah, keep your mouth shut.
What the fuck are you saying?
Right, mate, if you're going to go to the shower, you should take your sweater off first, pal.
So let's take a deep dive into some of the interesting things about Ted Lasso, and then we can finish up with if we think it's a treat or a trim for your watch list.
Okay, any questions so far?
Yeah, Coach, what's with the red string?
Ah, great question. In Japanese culture, they have a myth where they believe that all soulmates are connected by an invisible red string, and those strings are attached to each of their little fingers.
Okay, so why is it tied around our dicks?
Yeah, well, you know, that was Roy's idea. But I'm pretty sure the thought behind it is that it is nearly impossible to not be fully aware of what your teammate's doing when y'all got a rope tied around your ding-dongs. All right about that, Roy?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, great.
And let's get into some of the basics of Ted Lasso. So Ted Lasso is 3 seasons with 34 episodes, and they generally run about 45 minutes. There are the occasional hour-long episode in there. With the series airing from 2020 to 2023, Rotten Tomatoes critics give Ted Lasso an 89% rating, and the fans rating it just a little lower at 85%.
I'm giving this a lot of thought. Next time we do this drill, we tie multiple guys' dicks to one guy's dick. Yeah?
That was a one-shot deal, Roy.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we cooked that whole bird already, Coach.
Huh. Shame.
So let's jump into the positives of this show. I'll just jump in with one.
Great job! Oh, Roy Kent just said great job.
I've hyped this show up to people, and they're like, "Oh man, I'm just really not into soccer." And I'm like, you need to know zero about soccer. There's like, what, 10 soccer scenes in like almost the whole show. It is a soccer show.
Yeah, pretty much.
So that for me, that is a positive. So I will pass it to you. What are some positives you think about Ted Lasso?
I mean, oh god, there's so many to list. And let me touch on what you said real quick. Just because, yeah, I mean, I agree that very much you don't need to know soccer, anything at all. Like you don't need, and the best part is,
you know what? You can put your hands down real quick. How about I go ahead and address the larger than average elephant in the room? No, I have never coached the sport that you folks call football at any level.
Jesus.
And heck, you could fill 2 internets with what I don't know about football. But I'll tell you what I do know. I know that AFC Richmond, like any team I've ever coached, is going to go out there and give you everything they got for all 4 quarters.
Arbs.
What was that?
2 arbs.
Oh, right, sorry. Halves, yeah. They're gonna give you everything they got for 2 halves, win or lose.
Or tie.
Right, y'all do ties here. Sorry, that's gonna take some getting used to for me, okay? Because back where I'm from, you try to end the game in a tie, well, that might as well be the first sign of the apocalypse.
Because the central character, because Ted Lasso doesn't know anything about soccer, a lot of the show is spent teaching you the things that you wouldn't know because they're teaching it to him. Because he does, they teach the offside rule, they teach whatever.
Calm down. Explain to me how that's offsides. What? No, I'm serious. How's that offside? I don't understand it yet.
And so yeah, I mean it's very much you don't need to know it, but it is, if you are a soccer fan like I am, you still get some enjoyment out of understanding the things that they're talking about. But no, I think one of the aspects, probably the most positive aspect for me, is something that I already kind of touched on, is just that all of the characters in the show, there are very few wasted characters. There are very few like people that are introduced and don't at least get a callback at some point. And so many of the characters get so much development. I mean, Sam Obisanya goes from being this kid, on the soccer team who's in his early 20s, and he's, from Nigeria, and he's playing in England, and, he is kind of in a new country, in a new world, and a new, whatever. And he goes from being just this kind of naive kid who's working through learning how to, play a professional sport and represent his country and himself and his family, and goes, as the show goes on, he develops into somebody that, stands up for himself and really speaks out for the causes that he believes in, and leads to lasting actual change in the show's universe of helping to make his country and his world a little bit of a better place, and to help his friends and his teammates also become better people.
By
a
the
lot
end
of
the series,
their growth.
He finishes as my favorite character. I love him, especially seeing his growth.
And yeah, and I would see if they do end up doing a spin-off or continuing the show without Ted Lasso, but continuing with the characters that are still there, because it sounds like Jason Sudeikis is probably done, because he lives in Kansas, and he had to spend. He's actually very much Ted Lasso in real life, in that he lives in Kansas, but would spend 6, 7, 8 months out of the year away from his family in London shooting the show, and then get a couple months. And so after 3 seasons, he was kind of done, and so he didn't really win. But no, I agree that Sam Obisanya is absolutely one of my favorite characters, and he very much shows a lot of development and a lot of growth, and has an entire character arc. And to the point that I was saying is, if they continue the show, I'd love for him to be the guy that gets the captain's armband, and takes it, maybe Isaac gives it to him or whatever, because he very much becomes kind of the soul of the team.
Let's go. Okay. All right, Captain, count us off.
Oh, wow, that's me, yes. Okay. I don't know what to say. I'm honored to be your captain. And I love you guys so very much.
On 3, 1, 2, 3.
I love you guys so very much!
He becomes the heart. He becomes very much kind of the leader as far as their, values and ideals go. And it's just a fascinating thing to watch, because he is, the first episode, he has one of my favorite moments in the first episode, where Ted Lasso is kind of introducing himself to the players, and he it's his birthday and Sam's birthday, and Ted Lasso gives him some stuff, and he gets kind of all the players together to give him a birthday, because he wants to build this teamship, this camaraderie, and he gives him this little toy soldier, this American little toy soldier. And Sam takes it, and he kind of looks at it, and he goes, "Do you mind if I give this back to you? The American military doesn't have the same meaning for me as it does for you."
Imperialism.
And Ted Lasso goes, "Imperialism," because imperialism. And it's a fun moment. It is very much kind of one of the first moments where I really laughed out loud. But it's also very much a demonstration of who Sam is, and and the fact that he has that capability within himself to kind of express his ideals and his beliefs and his values, and he kind of develops that further as the show goes on. So very much one of the positive aspects is just their character development.
Yeah, I totally agree. And another one, a positive I have, and I mentioned it earlier. I think this actually captures what it's like for a professional sports team's their locker room. As a viewer, you feel like you're bonded into the team. You feel like you're really a part of the group. And I think this could vie for like best sports TV show.
So we got that going on, and obviously we're bummed out that O'Brien tore his butt.
It's my upper hamstring, Coach.
Well, you tore your butt, son. There's nothing to be ashamed of, okay? It happens. People tear their butts all the time in athletics.
I don't know if it is the best sports TV show, but it's definitely needs to be talked about in that conversation. It's definitely one of the most heartwarming and heartfelt TV shows I've seen. So any other positives you want to touch on?
Yeah, and I'd love to, I very much agree with you. I mean, obviously, I don't have kind of the same understanding of a professional locker room like you do, because I never was good enough to get paid to play. But having been in a lot of locker rooms and spent, hockey locker rooms, whatever, I do agree that a lot of the bonding that happens between the team is stuff that you see and stuff that you talk about when you with a team for several years, or when you're with a bunch of people and you routinely playing the sport with them and whatever. I definitely think it is one of the better sports TV shows out there. It's probably neck and neck with Shoresy for me as far as best goes. I was really impressed with Shoresy. I was actually more impressed with Shoresy than I thought I would be.
Same. I had the same feeling about that. I didn't think I was going to like it.
Yeah,
but I loved it. I thought it was probably the most accurate hockey depiction of a show ever. Oh,
absolutely. But the other aspect that I'd really like to talk about that I really appreciated is, one of the central characters in the show. I mean, two of the most central characters in the show, Keely and Rebecca, are both very strong, very well written, very independent women in the show, and kind of get their own development as people independent of the men in their lives. And I mean, there is kind of throughout the show there is a romantic triangle between Keely and Jamie and Roy, and that gets a lot of development, that gets a lot of discussion. But I also think that they the way they approached it was very adult and very mature.
Not everyone in your life is out to get you.
I am. What? Thought you respected honesty.
I think that, it even in the third season, it kind of comes to a head between Jamie and Roy, and they about who's going to get to end up with Keely, and there's this whole thing about whatever, and they end up getting into a fight, like an actual physical fight over it, and then afterwards, the very next scene is them going to Keely and saying, "We're idiots, like that we fought over this. We were idiots," and I won't spoil like how that kind of ends up, but it was great to see, like here's this cliched idea of these two men fighting over this woman, and very immediately followed up with, "Well, that was dumb. We shouldn't have done that. That was really stupid." And so it's a very adult and very kind of feminist forward depiction of women and their roles in sports and their roles in business.
I think a lot of shows, as soon as like Keely and whoever break up, I think a lot of shows would have dumbed down her role, tempered it back a little, but they definitely didn't do that. She's a very pivotal, as in all aspects. They never made it about the boys. She was always that strong, independent woman. And yeah, I agree that not only does the show take that very strong feminist view of, they're independent women and they can do, everything just as good as the boys. They also are not afraid to jump in on, the mental health crises that are going on, racism, homophobia. Like, they are not afraid to go in after things on this show. And I certainly love that and appreciate that about Ted Lasso.
Okay, I get it. Isaac, look, what that guy said, inexcusable, all right? But man, your reaction to it ain't gonna be taught in any Tibetan monasteries anytime soon. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, now we're one man down.
Yeah, Isaac, come on, man. There's nothing we haven't had before, yeah?
Exactly. It's just pooper. Ignore it, man.
Ignore it! I don't want to fucking ignore it! What if one of us is gay? Huh? We shouldn't have to deal with this shit!
I absolutely loved it. Yeah, I mean, they centralized, very much centralized in the third season, a gay character, Colin, and it's a minor spoiler that he's gay, but it's not a huge. It doesn't affect anything to find that out now. But because especially in the second season, there are actually several times, and I remember in the Ted Lasso subreddit during the second season, a lot of people were kind of exploring the idea that Colin was gay. They never confirm it until the third season, but there's things that he said and things that he did where you're like, okay, it's entirely possible that Colin may be
one
gay.
of those written down for, I was going to mention it later, but we were talking about how this show like sets things up. So let me find it because I do have it written down. Okay, so in season 2, episode 3, they drop a hint about Colin being gay. Keeley says the dating app is called Banter, spelled Bantr, and Colin chimes in, "Oh, like Grindr." And then Colin officially comes out about 18 episodes later, season 3, episode 9. So, like we were saying, they do an excellent job of dropping these Easter eggs in these episodes.
Yeah, well, and it's great because there's the Grindr, and that was such a good moment because he says, "Oh, like Grindr," and there's a beat, and a couple of people kind of look at him, and each kind of looks around like, "What?" Like, and it's obviously very vague because like I know what Grindr is, and I know how it's spelled, and I'm not gay, but so it obviously is very vague, but they definitely drop some hints, and then in the third season, one of the episodes, I think it's like 4 or 5, starts with him at home with his boyfriend or the guy that he's seeing with their official, and so it touches on the fact that like you said, like he doesn't actually come out until later on in the season, but you find out early on that he is gay and he's dealing with this. And one of my favorite aspects of the third season is when Trent Krim, who is the journalist in the beginning and is now left and is writing a book about Richmond, AFC Richmond, and Ted Lasso, finds that and by the way, Trent is another one of my characters who's absolutely one of my favorites. I love his development from season 1, kind of stuffy, arrogant, whatever, to season 3, where he loves the team and he's very bought in and he's very much a like kind of trying to be this independent writer, this where he's not letting his biases show, but also clearly is rooting for Richmond and wants them to win and so on and so forth. But he finds out that Colin is gay, and he reveals to Colin, "Hey, I'm gay too. And you're not alone dealing with this. I know what you're going through. Let's talk and let's whatever." And they kind of discuss like how hard that would be to be in a professional locker room, which is especially in a men's sport, which is very much testosterone, and there are posters of naked women and whatever, and eventually Colin does come out to the team, and they all take it really well, which isn't surprising because at this point they've all developed this cohesive identity. And actually the person who takes it the hardest is Colin's best friend, and the whole reason that he gets upset with Colin is that Colin didn't talk to him, didn't feel like he could trust him with that, and so it's just interesting, and it's very excellent depiction. I mean, obviously I'm not gay, I don't really know what it's like, but from the people that I do know, that I've talked to, whatever, it strikes me as a very interesting and very well thought out, depiction of being gay in sports and just being gay in general, and like having to hide this aspect of who you feel like you have to hide this aspect of who you are, and just there's a lot of progressive politics. It's definitely not like my dad, who was a very conservative person, watched the first season and loved it, and then stopped watching about halfway through the second season because it was, I don't know, it was too woke for him. And that's, if that's something that bothers you, then okay, it's probably not going to be your show.
Oh yeah.
But it's something that I loved, something that I appreciated, and that I felt that they did really well without being too heavy-handed. Is kind of the big thing for me. Like, they didn't hit you over the head with it, but they said like, this is part of life, and this is part of people, and this is something that you're going to deal with, and something these people are dealing with, and let's show you that. They talk about the racism that Sam experiences in England with the Nigerian refugees and the African refugees, and he's standing up for them, and there's a whole aspect of that of the third season where he's standing up for these refugees that are coming in, and he experiences a lot of backlash from it. And dealing with that racism, and that's a really big thing in European soccer right now. There's a story every week about a player who has racist thing, a black African player who has racist things yelled at him while he's on the field, who has their
thrown
players,
at them.
Yes, had bananas thrown at them. Who just experience all this different stuff. Instead, I was glad to see. And that is something, if we get into those, I wish they'd kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. But I was glad to see that they did touch on it, that they did talk about that a little bit, because it is such a big aspect of what's kind of going on over there right now and what they're having to deal with. And these guys, like you were saying, these guys are just trying to play a sport. They're trying to make a living. They're trying to whatever. And then you got these fans in the stands who are yelling things at them, who are throwing things at them, who are treating them like trash because they feel like they can. They feel like they have that right. And it's like, you don't. They're human beings. And people lose sight of that. And this show really embraces the idea that these people are human beings, and they have lives, and they have, dreams and loves and all that stuff. And, this is what it's like for them. And I love that. It's very much a positive, aspect of that. But
I think what people really fail to keep in mind is, like, at the end of the day, these games, these sports, they're really just theater if you think about it. Like, these people are here for your entertainment. Like, this isn't some big, like, gang war. This is people trying to, like, have fun, play a game, entertain you, and at the end of the day, everyone is just going to go home and live their lives, and fans just need to keep that in mind. I've been there. It's fucking weird.
Look, I get that some people think if they buy a ticket, they've got the right to yell whatever abusive shit they want at footballers. But they're not just footballers. They're also people. And none of us know what is going on in each other's lives.
But yeah, I mean, the feminine portrayals in this show are excellent. That one of the big things, the Bechdel test, do two women ever have a conversation that's not about the men in their lives or whatever? And so much of this show very much passes the Bechdel test. Very much, Keely and Rebecca's friendship develops from season 1 through season 3 is one of the most touching, most endearing developments of the entire show that I just love. And I love to see, like, that they strongly stand up for each other, and they love each other, and they're always there for each other, and that they want to help each other out in every way that they can. And it's just really a wonderful thing to see.
at the start of season 1, they're both a mess. But I mean, the difference is one is a messy billionaire and like the other one's a messy 20-year-old. And by the end, like they're both still a mess, but like they have each other and they're both
right.
What's the saying? All tides raise ships or something. They brought each other up.
A rising tide raises all ships. Yeah. So yeah, they definitely bring each other up and make each other's world better. And it's so much more than just man trouble. It's, you know, when Keely has problems with her business, Rebecca bails her out, you know, helps her out with that.
You want me to get a shoe deal?
Oh, I'd love to. Any brand in particular?
No brands, just shoes. In general, you know.
Great, I'll look into it for you.
They celebrate each other's successes, and they really care about like pulling for each other in every aspect of their lives. And it's really good to see that, you know, and to see that depicted.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
that's
definitely one of my big positives.
You want to go see the Richmond match tonight? Either of you?
Will it be as violent as last time?
Probably not.
Then no.
Okay, awesome. So I think my last positive, as somebody who has been a professional coach in a past life, I think Ted Lasso needs to be required viewing for like anybody who is in a coaching role.
Okay, well, look, hey, I hate to bring up work in a moment like this, but we do have a second half of a match to play. Coach, what we got?
Playing a man down.
What do we do differently?
Absolutely nothing!
I mean, we have an asshole coach problem in the world as general.
Yeah.
So if we can get any of Ted Lasso's positivity into like a coach, I'm all for it. Do you have any other positives before we head into some of the negatives?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I didn't really, you know, that we haven't even really talked about. I mean, we talked about the fact that the show is funny. It is a comedy. It does have, but I don't think we've talked about, like, I mean, there were multiple scenes, multiple episodes, especially in the first season is easily the funniest of all of them. The second and third are still funny, but the first season definitely has the best comedy moments. And I mean, there are multiple episodes where my wife and I were just crying while we were watching it. We were laughing so hard. And it is truly, I mean, it is a dramedy. There are aspects of drama to it, and it is real and whatever. But it is also hilariously written, very well acted. You know, a lot of the comic moments. I mean, you can tell that a lot of these guys, like Jason Sudeikis, come from a comedy background, come from a, you know, humorous background. And so much of that is sprinkled throughout the show of, you know, they're just really getting into like the just little moments here and there that add up to make you just cry laughing. I mean, and Roy Kent, Brett Goldstein is probably maybe the funniest character on the show.
Any thoughts, Roy? Jamie Tart is a muppet, and I hope he dies of the incurable condition of being a little bitch.
Tell us how you really feel.
Okay, you're a shit manager.
Not about me, you twat.
Language, boys.
Well, he asked for it.
He did ask for it.
Without, like, he's very much the straight man to a lot of, you know, the other humorous parts, but he's so dry and he's so gruff and so, you know, talks like this and very whatever. But just, there's so many episodes where I just, you know, he would say something in that dry, gruff, sarcastic tone of his, and I would just crack up. And I mean, it's just hilarious. And he is, from everything that I've read, Brett Goldstein is maybe one of the nicest people in the world.
Right.
And is supposed to be very funny. And he started as a writer for the show. He was one of the main writers for the show. And then he said, he looked at the character of Roy Kent, who they hadn't cast yet, and he said, oh, I can be that. And so he tried out, and they gave him the role, and he nails it. He's incredible. Roy Kent is a wonderful character who also goes through a lot of development, but also has kind of, you know, the aspects that are just very funny, and his relationship with his niece Phoebe is a very, like, constantly making me laugh and constantly kind of giving, you know whatever.
Oh, we can't let her go snooping around though. I don't want to find my vibrator.
Yeah, that's gonna be a problem. And Mum said no electronics.
and so the humor is above and beyond, and very telling, that it came out in August of 2020 or July of 2020, I think. And, at this time that we were all going through COVID and we're all stuck at home and we're all dealing with the concerns and the fears and the anxiety. And here comes this show that is lighthearted and funny and sweet and positive. And it very positive. And it was such an uplifting show. I mean, I think my wife and I probably watched the first season before, just from the time the first season came out to when the second season came out the next August. So just in a little over a year, we probably watched the first season a dozen times, just front to back the whole way through. Because the first season is only 10 episodes. You talked about the basics, the 34 episodes. The first season's 10 episodes. And most of the first season episodes are about 30 to 35 minutes. They're much shorter.
Yeah,
it gets longer as the show went on. Apple wanted more from them. But we watched. I mean, so you could knock out the first season in, 4, 5, 6 hours.
Yeah,
and we would, and we would just, anytime we were feeling down, anytime we were feeling anxious, we'd put that on and we just watch. And every time we would laugh. It never stopped being funny. It never stopped, making us laugh and making us happy. In fact,
all right, let's go kick their butts.
Butts on 3.
Works for me. 1, 2, 3. Butts!
Awesome. Very well said. And a beautiful transition to what do you not like about the show?
Piss off, wanker. I hope you choke on a Big Mac.
Good thing these are anonymous.
No, Roy signed that one.
So I'll go first. I think there are some rough patches with the story where some of the transitions, especially from episode to episode, they don't really fill out that story. Time has passed.
Right.
And then they'll just be like, oh, hey, casually mention this thing has happened. I don't necessarily like that. That was probably my biggest negative.
There are definitely some aspects where you there are time skips and you're not really sure where you are, like in the season, in the year, in the, especially in the second season, there's a lot of that where it's like, you don't really, you're at the beginning of the season and they've tied 7 straight games or whatever. And then you get to the Christmas episode and they've won several games, and then you get further on the season and they've won more games, and then they've lost some games, and they're having some, and so the time kind of gets lost a little bit. And yeah, I do feel like I definitely can see where you're coming from with that. Like there are definitely some times where you're a little confused about where you're at in the story and where you're at in the season and where things are going, and they did a little better with that in season 3, where they kind of show as they're winning these games, as the games are going, they show they won this one, they won this one, they won this one, whatever, and they show as the time kind of moves on, as the season gets deeper into the season, they demonstrate that a little more, so it's a little clearer. But for sure, there are times where you're just like, I don't. And I think it comes from, in the first season, he comes in like halfway through the season, or maybe even afterwards, when she fires the first coach and she brings in Ted Lasso. And so it's a much shorter frame of time. So there's not as much that they have to go over. It kind of feels like it all happens very quickly. And then the second and third season are full seasons of English soccer, which run from September to May. 9 months out of the year. And so you're covering a very long period of time with a show that is 12, 45 minutes to an hour long episodes. And so it's kind of, you lose a little bit of that for sure.
I was just going to say, the person I was watching it with, there were 2 or 3 episodes where we started an episode and we both look at each other and we're like, did we skip an episode? And again, it was just those time jumps. But I do believe you had something else.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so probably the big negative for me, I won't say there were any too big of negatives. There's some nitpicks that I had. in the second and third season, there's this character, Nate. So Nate is one of the central characters, has this restaurant that he loves to go to, Taste of Athens, this Greek restaurant in Tutin. There's a whole kind of big thing about that. But in this restaurant, there's this character that is kind of his nemesis at the beginning, Jade. She's the hostess. And he comes in and she won't give him the table that he wants, and she's kind of rude to him. The storyline first serves as an opportunity for Nate to grow as somebody that can kind of stand up for himself and be more assertive and be a more confident person. And in some ways starts kind of his downfall that is a big part of season 2, and then his rehabilitation that's a big part of season 3. And I would like to say real quick, I was at the end of season 2, I hated Nate as a character, and not like I didn't think he was a good character. I hated who he'd become because Nick Mohammed, who is his actor, did such a good job. He's incredible, an amazing actor, and he does such a good job of really selling this downfall, that his character kind of buys into his own hype and really kind of mistakes arrogance for confidence, which is a big issue that some people have is they think that arrogance equals confidence, and that's not the same thing at all. But to Nate, it is, and so he kind of has this whole downfall, and I was not interested at all in seeing him get rehabilitated, because it's a big thing in the show is that characters, they explain why characters do things and they show them becoming better people, and I thought that was what they were going to do, and I wasn't interested in that at all for Nate because of how far he'd gone. And not everybody gets rehabilitated. Not everybody gets that, whatever.
Yeah,
and then they
100%
did it in season,
agree on that.
and then they did it in season 3, and they wrote it so well, and Nick Mohammed sells it so well that I was instantly bought in on him being rehabilitated and him being a better person and him kind of growing back to be a better version, as Ted Lasso says, becoming a better version of who he's meant to be. So there's this character Jade that he meets as the hostess, and he clearly has a crush on her, and she won't give him the time of day. And then in season 3, he actually develops a relationship with her, and I wasn't wild about her character because it felt very one-dimensional to me. I didn't really feel like I didn't really
felt like
get
an afterthought.
I didn't get the development of their relationship. Like, she went from being rude to him and clearly not liking him at all to suddenly sitting down with him after he gets stood up on a date and eating with him and then going on a date with him and then developing this relationship with him. And I loved their relationship, but I didn't feel like there was really, they didn't sell me on it. They didn't really show how that developed. It just kind of happened. And for a show that was usually very good about showing why things are happening, and showing why characters act in the way they're acting, they didn't really do that with her. And so it felt very one-dimensional. It felt a little bit like, part of why I didn't like it is because for a show that was very much about having women be independent characters who are not there just to serve as the, impetus for the man, she kind of felt that way for Nate. And I wasn't wild about that because that was something they'd done really well of not having. And then they bring in this character, and she kind of feels like she's just there to push Nate to be a better person instead of being there for her own self, for her own character. And I just wasn't wild about that. And in general,
100%. Yeah, I agree on that 100%. That was one of my other negatives. Actually, my only other negative was just Nate's character. To me, it felt like they didn't really have a plan for them or for him, but they liked Nick Mohammed enough that they were just kind of like, we'll throw you story and give you more story and stuff. And then I actually have to disagree with you. I didn't buy into the redemption. I don't think he did enough to be redeemed at the end. I think he did some horrendous shit, and I would have liked the role, or not the role. I would have liked them to what you said, where some people, sorry, they don't get redeemed.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I would have liked to see that go.
Yeah, and I could have, and I'll say this: from everything that I've seen amongst the fan base, Nate's redemption in season 3 is easily probably the most divisive part of season 3. I liked it. I thought it was good. I thought that they did a good job of. I think that they could have done a better job, but I think that they did a good job of showing the slow realization for him that he was trying to be somebody that he wasn't. That he'd gotten this. Rebecca, told him, you need to stand up for yourself, you need to be more assertive, you need to whatever, and he got this idea that meant that he needed to be kind of a bully, and he needed to be mean, and he needed to whatever, and you're right. I mean, he absolutely did some horrendous shit. Like I said, by the end of season 2, I hated him as a character. But I thought that they did a good job of showing that, he was trying to be this person because he thought that that's what being assertive was, because he didn't really understand. And they touch a little bit on that he didn't really have a good male role model because he had a very strained relationship with his father. And I will say that, so I recently lost my own father, and it was actually this past year. And as I was going through that and dealing with that loss, I was also watching Ted Lasso, and there are several moments in season 3 that are very much like a son and a father, like moments, and had me just absolutely in tears because what I was dealing with. But the reconciliation between Nate and his father is one of my favorite scenes. I wish that it had been developed a little more, that they'd kind of led into it a little more, but the actual reconciliation was a very touching, very thought-provoking moment where they talk, and they, these two characters that clearly had a vast gulf between them kind of start bridging that gulf. And it's a very sweet moment in season 3, and it absolutely had me in tears when I watched it. But it's a good moment, and it's a wonderful display of Nick's acting ability. And his father's, and I don't know who his father is, but his father's a wonderful actor as well. And he kind of has this moment where he says, well, I just, the kind of person, he calls him a genius, and I don't, that may be going a little far. It may be a little pushing into Nate's whatever too much, but he says, I didn't know how to raise him. And so that's why I struggled with that. And it's very much a moment where it's like, because like I had kind of a strained relationship with my father when I was younger, and we got better towards the end. And it kind of a similar thing where it's like, it felt like he didn't really know how to raise the kind of person that I was, and I didn't really know how to interact with him as the kind of person that he was. And so I saw a lot of myself in that scene in my own relationship with my father. And so that was a very touching moment. But in general, like a lot of season 3, I think, is Nate realizing that I don't have to be a bully, that's not who I am. That's not who I'm supposed to be. I can be better than that. And coming to the place where he can be better than that, and he rejects the idea of being this bully, being this famous, being whatever that he was clearly enjoying up to that point. And then, but you can also see that he's uncomfortable with some of the things. You can see that he's uncomfortable with the idea that, maybe like I liked being who I was before. And so there's a lot to it. I thought they definitely could have done a better job with it. I liked it, but I can absolutely see why people didn't like it.
I was just going to say, it kind of felt towards the end that, like, they knew it was ending, and they were just kind of like, oh shit, we have to, like, write some endings now. It was kind of like they just wrapped it up real quick.
Yeah, and in general, I was going to say, like, that my other, I think, big negative just in general, and not to say that I didn't enjoy it, because I did. But season 3 is definitely the weakest season of the 3. There were probably the one, now that I think about it, the one major storyline that I didn't feel like got wrapped up very well was the whole Zava thing. When they bring in this, who is clearly meant to be, weird. Who is clearly meant to be a takeoff of a soccer player named Zlatan Ibrahimovic. And if you don't know who that is, look him up. He's
the headbutt
He's
guy,
a character.
Right?
He's a very interesting. Yes, that is what he's known for. But he's just very much been a character his entire career. He's one of the best soccer players of his generation, probably just behind Messi and Ronaldo. Definitely the best pure striker of this generation, whereas Messi and Ronaldo are attacking players, more kind of midfielders. Zlatan is a striker. And so Zaba is very clearly meant to be a Zlatan Ibrahimovic type guy where, very much kind of buys into his own stuff, constantly on different teams because he's not maybe great for a locker room, especially one like AFC Richmond's, but is kind of brought in as a panic buy and then just kind of exits just as quickly. It's kind of a very weird moment where like he just retires and that's it. And then there's like one more reference to him later on in the season, but it's in the show, it's kind of very confusing because it's like, here's this guy that's been central to this team, winning a lot of games this season, and now he's gone, and they really don't talk about him at all after that. Like the episode when he first leaves, like they kind of talk about it. Like I mean, they definitely talk about it. They're like, oh my God, Zaba's gone. What are we gonna do? Blah blah blah. But after that, they never really it never really gets brought up.
Yeah, they kind of just wrap it up with I think the line is, "Well, son, like he didn't quit the team; he quit the sport."
Right, and then that's it, and then it's just gone. They don't talk about it.
Hey, coach. What about Zava? He quit the team.
I mean, technically, he retired from the whole sport, which makes it feel a little less personal, yeah?
And so, like, there are definitely aspects of the third season that do feel a little bit, and I know that my understanding that because the third season was very much delayed from when it was supposed to come out. A lot of people thought it was going to come out in 2022, the summer of 2022. It ended up not coming out until early 2023. And my understanding is that there were a lot of rewrites. That Jason Sudeikis was not very happy with how season 3 had been written when they were first like putting it together and doing the production on it, whatever. And so there was a lot of rewrites on season 3. And I don't know specifically what it was. They didn't really kind of touched on that. I haven't seen anything about it. So it took longer because they kind of went back and redid a lot of stuff. And you can kind of get that feeling because it does feel kind of unfinished. And not to say that they don't wrap it up. They do. And I'm perfectly happy with how it ended. I thought that the finale episode was amazing. I thought it was
I agree.
about as well as they could have actually finished the show.
Awesome. So let's go ahead. If you don't have any other negatives, let's go ahead and jump to the facts and trivia.
Even with Zava, Richmond eat more ass than your mom.
Buddy, you gotta get off Twitter.
This is a text from my father.
Do have a couple of those. So according to Hannah Weddingham, the shortbread biscuits that Ted brings Rebecca every morning were, quote, absolutely horrific. The prop department admitted they hadn't put much effort into making them taste delicious, as they hadn't realized Weddingham would eat them with so much enthusiasm on screen. So there you go. Shout out to the prop department. I mean, like, could have made those appetizing, but that was a choice. Weddingham refers to eating the cookies as the greatest acting of my life. And then we have another quick fact. So Nelson Road Stadium, which is AFC Richmond's home stadium, is actually Selhurst Park, the real-life home of Premier League club Crystal Palace. And Ted's first match as coach is also against Crystal Palace. And then Rebecca's office and the training field are based off of Hayes and Yedding United FC, which I understand is like a very, very low league club.
Yeah.
The music in the show, pretty decent. I tend to make fun of this band, but they're one of their members, Marcus Mumford of the band Mumford and Sons, did all the music for the show, and credit to him. I actually do enjoy a lot of the scoring of the show. And like Zach mentioned, go ahead.
I think that the intro song is one of the catchier intro songs out there as far as shows go. I listen to it pretty much every single time And then actually one of my favorite, the Beard After Dark episode in season 2, when they do kind of a acoustic, slower paced version of the intro song, is really good. And yeah, in general, I think that I enjoy the music. I enjoy a lot of, especially, I think the best music was probably in season 2. The Rainbow episode, I think I listened to Rainbow at least once a day for like 2 weeks after that. The Rainbow by the Rolling Stones.
Right.
And was very much, is a great, and tied to that, if I can add my own little interesting factoid. Higgins, the character Higgins, has a wife on the show, and Rainbow, the whole episode Rainbow it's called that because his ringtone for his wife is Rainbow by the Rolling Stones, because that was the first song, that was their song. The interesting part is that Higgins' wife is his real life wife.
Right.
They are married in real life, and so they're when they're acting together, they're actually married, and so I always thought that was very kind of fun, like a fun little aspect of it. But yeah, that's I very much enjoyed a lot of the music, and turns out that the reason that Mumford did the music for the show is because I guess he's really good friends with Jason Sudeikis. And so when Sudeikis was putting the show together, he specifically reached out to Marcus and said, "Hey, would you do the music for the show? Would you, and he said, "Yeah, sure, absolutely." And so he wrote the song, and kind of that was that. But I think that the intro song is definitely one of my favorites, and I don't think I had really ever skipped it. In the entire 3 seasons, I think I listen to it every time, which is unusual. Usually I'm trying to hit that skip button as soon as it says like you can skip the intro, and I never really did that for Ted Lasso. So
I skipped it every time, but it was always a hard decision.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And yeah, I mean, that was the other fun fact. And I do remember reading about the biscuits thing, and feeling very disappointed by that, because she was such a good actor.
Right?
I truly thought that those were like the best biscuits in the world. I'm like, I want to try those now, because she looked like she enjoyed them so much, and she whatever, and they looked good. And then I remember reading, that she said that they were just awful, and I'm like, that's incredibly disappointing, and B, you're incredible, because I believe that you were eating like heaven on earth, when you were eating this. So,
yeah, every time she's on screen, I'm like, I need to make cookies.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, it was very much and then I think the other kind of fun fact is I won't say fun fact, but I referenced it when we first started talking about the show, is that it started out as that commercial for NBC Sports, and if you haven't, if anybody's listening to this and they haven't seen those commercials, I would in fact say go and watch those commercials before you watch Ted Lasso. There's 2 of those.
There'll be some clips in here of them.
Hey, that's, wow, 3 points. No points. No points. Why not? It's got to go in. Come on, Rob. You got to get it in there to get 3 points. 1 point.
Okay.
Because I already pulled some clips of it. He's a little more of an asshole in that commercial.
Yes.
When he actually gets the series, positive. He's more positive.
Yes.
Now, if I was a Fulham fan, what I would encourage them to do, go out to the parking lot. Mm-hmm. Hide. You wait for the referee to come out there, get into his little car, and you follow him home. You tweet his address, and you let the good people of Fulham take matters in their own hands.
Obviously, don't go and do that, please.
Hey, you do whatever you like.
We can't condone anything of the sort.
No, we can't. Live!
It's live!
And we're clear on the floor.
All right. Hey, that was fun.
You're a
Yeah. Hi, she knew my nickname.
But I love that Beard, who is, I think, one of his main writing partners, actually. Like, they've done a lot of writing together. But I love that Beard is Beard in the commercial and in the TV series. Brendan Hunt, that's his name. Brendan Hunt, I think, is one of his main writing partners. So we kind of worked together on this. But that they had that character in the commercials, and he's still in the show, and is still his assistant and whatever. And so I liked that a lot.
Well, the first thing I had to do when getting this job was learn about the competition. We came up with the flashcard system in order for me to make American comparisons to English teams. All I had to do was link what I don't know to what I do know.
Manchester United. Super rich, everybody either loves them or hates them.
Dallas Cowboys.
Liverpool. Used to be great, haven't won a title in a really long time.
Also Dallas Cowboys.
Cardiff City, Dragons on the crest.
What's that hot girl's name from Game of Thrones?
Khaleesi.
Khaleesi.
Manchester City.
Jennifer Lawrence.
West Ham United.
Pickup trucks. Because of that training that I did, I guarantee that we're going to beat the Cowboys and Jennifer Lawrence.
And then, the other ones we touched, like the fact that Danny's actor was a professional football player, so actually had that experience and kind of stuff along those lines, like other fun facts, and Brett Goldstein was the writer before he was Roy Kent.
All right, well, I have one more fun fact for y'all. The Premier League got paid about £500,000 for the use of their logos and team names for season 3. So for those 12 episodes, they made quite a bit of money.
I said that made me think of something fun. Just reminded me of something. Soccer Saturday, that is a big part of it, that Roy Kent goes on in season 2 as a pundit, and then is a big part of season 3 as well. Soccer Saturday is a real Premier League show in England where they talk about the games that are happening. And Chris Kamara and Jeff, I can't remember Jeff's last name. Chris Kamara and Jeff are both real people who actually do that show.
They're like a woman behind the wheel, completely lost.
George, didn't you lose your licence drink driving?
That was an allergic reaction to my medication.
Is that the same medication that made you piss your pants?
It's interesting because that is very much a real show, and there's 2 very real football pundits in England, and so it's kind of cool to get to see, like the amount of thought that went into, like, we want to make this as real as possible at that point, as far as having real football pundits talking about this team.
I found out that George Harrison had died. I realised I had to stop waiting for life to begin, start taking chances, living life to the fullest.
But George Harrison died 20 years ago.
Yeah, but I only just found out.
And also Arlo White, who does all the announcing for the Richmond games, is a real announcer for English Premier League teams. Is one of the best, probably most famous announcers. At least, yeah, he does a lot of the NBC Sports games, the NBC Sports Premier League games. He's the main guy, and has a beautiful voice. It's wonderful.
I mean, that guy sounds like Elle McPherson farting into Miles Davis's trumpet.
But is the kind of does all the announcing for the Richmond games, which is funny because I don't think he's probably announced for a championship, which is the second level, and is where Richmond is playing at one point. I don't think he's probably ever announced for a championship game ever. But they have him doing it in season 2 because they'd already paid him, and he's very much a recognizable figure in English football, and so had him doing the announcing. But that is a fun, like, kind of nod to real English football, as those 2 aspects.
Well, with any new job, you got to anticipate a learning curve. But I tell you what, I'm in Tottenham, and I'm here to stay. You can guarantee that. 1 second here. Oh, nope, I got fired. Is there a third kind of football maybe I could look into?
Awesome. That's great to know. So we have talked about this next section a little bit, and I 100% agree with you. I think this wraps up as Ted Lasso. I don't think we will get a show called Ted Lasso again. God, I hope not. No. If this continues, they need to switch names. Yes. My proposal is it's going to be called Richmond AFC. And yep, like you called it, Sam is going to be the main character, and we're going to get a core of, Danny, Zorro, basically just everybody. Yeah, everybody except Lasso. It goes on. I think we're also going to get an addition of a women's AFC team. I think that they drop a little bit of a hint in the end of the episode, or the end of the series finale. But yes. I am fairly certain this comes back, just not as a Ted Lasso property.
Yeah, I'm almost certain that we'll get a spinoff. I mean, I would put it at like 99.5% sure right now that we'll get some continuation of this universe, in some form or fashion. And I would even say that we might get Jason Sudeikis appearing occasionally. Ted Lasso appearing occasionally, even if it's just like a Zoom call or whatever, because it definitely feels like this has been Jason Sudeikis' baby, and I think that he'll still want to be involved in some way, with the production of it, and with even if it's not him being over there and filming and doing all the stuff that they had to do. I do think that we'll probably see him involved in make appearances once a season or something as it continues. But I'm excited to see what comes next with this.
Hopefully it has the same high production standard and everything can live up to the hype that I think Ted Lasso has brought. So one idea I had for a reboot is I understand that Messi just signed with Miami, the soccer team down there. And I understand that one of his signing deals is he got a percentage of the revenue from new subscribers to Apple TV's soccer coverage. So, I actually wonder if they bring this back as Ted Lasso in the United States. What if we get a Ted Lasso deal where he coaches an MLS team? It doesn't have to be Miami, but that would be a great tie-in. And something that I could see being a reboot possibility, and honestly, would love to see it.
Figure it out! This is what we're doing!
Let's get into our ratings.
It's our turn to make history, and I believe we're going to do just that.
I'll give you first crack at this. So out of 1 to 10, with 10 being the absolute very best and 1 being, hey, I probably need to skip this, what do you think Ted Lasso rates in as?
If we actually win this match, I will burn this pub to the ground. I will knock over a chair. I will channel my raging enthusiasm into ways to help my community.
And think of this as like your last chance to persuade people to watch it or not watch it.
Okay, so because I love it so much, my first thought is like, oh, it's just a 10. It's just a 10. And whatever, watch it. I'll tell every person that I know that they need to watch this. I've recommended it to everybody. Most of the people, other than my dad, who stopped watching it not because he didn't enjoy it, but because it was too woke. Everybody that I've recommended this show to has loved it and has enjoyed it and makes them happy and so on. So I want to say that it's, when it comes to like rating it as a should you watch this 1 to 10, yes, you should watch it. As a show, as a whole, as an ensemble, as the entire show, 1 to 10 as a rating, I'd say like the first season would be a 10 for me. Genuinely, the first season, I could watch the first season 3 days in a row, front to back, the whole thing, and enjoy it every single time. It is probably, as far as I am concerned, the first season is probably as close to a perfect season of television as you can get. The entire show as an ensemble, I'd probably put it a 9 to 9.5, leaning more towards the 9 side. And that really is probably brought down by season 3, which I'd put it like a 7 to 7.5. Still very good, still very enjoyable. Definitely not as good as the first season. Definitely not as good as the second season. So yeah, as a whole, I'd say the show is probably a 9.
2 big thumbs up, as expected.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, very well said. So I agree with pretty much all of that. I think Ted Lasso is probably in the running for one of the best all-time sports-related shows. I think out of the 3 seasons, we probably got about 2.5 seasons of solid storytelling, And this is basically just the Mighty Ducks for millennials. And some of these characters are probably more fully developed than some people I actually know in real life. So that's how good this is written. And for that, I agree. I think this is probably a 9 for me.
Sammy, how'd that feel? Oh, wonderful, Coach. I felt that one in my opinions. Yeah, no, that sounds about right. That's good.
But season 3 almost ruined it. And season 3 is not bad. I think, like we were saying earlier, it feels kind of truncated and rushed. But so that probably brought it down to an 8 for me. But like Zach was saying, they wrapped this show up very, very nicely. And that kind of, that raised it up a point, and that gets me to that 9. So there you have it. We both recommend the show. So I definitely recommend that people check it out.
A lot of folks like to say there's no place like home. That's true. But there ain't a whole lot of places like AFC Richmond either.
Let's close it out with some recommendations.
Make the defense believe you. Watch like this. Ball! Ball! Give me the ball! I want the ball! Give me the ball! I would like the ball, please!
So I'll just throw Welcome to Wrexham out there. It's basically like real life Ted Lasso. You have Rob McElhenney from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and Ryan Reynolds from
Everything.
Yeah, Daredevil,
Yeah.
or not Daredevil.
What has he not been in
wrong
at this
superhero.
point?
For real.
Yeah, Deadpool.
He owns everything.
Yeah.
By the time this comes out, he'll own this podcast.
Probably.
But anyway,
That'd be great. That'd be exciting.
Oh yeah, I would be stoked. Basically, they're trying to take a football club from one of the very, very low levels up to the Premier League. It is heartbreaking. It is exciting. There are shots in that show where I literally held my breath. So I definitely recommend that one. Anything you recommend for the listeners?
Yeah, and let me touch on that. Like, I haven't watched all of Welcome to Wrexham yet, so I do know how it ends because I know what's happened with Wrexham this past year. Which is, we won't get into because people should watch the show. But also tied into that is it should be noted that Wrexham is a Welsh team, and so there's kind of that fun added aspect of you've got England and then you've got Wales, which is almost a culturally very different place, and so there's kind of that added aspect to it. But yeah, no, I definitely recommend that. Another recommendation that I throw out, and it's also on Apple TV, so if you're watching Ted Lasso, you can watch this one right afterwards, is Shrinking.
Oh yeah, I've heard a lot of good stuff about that one.
Is the head writer is Brett Goldstein, aka
awesome.
Roy Kent, is the head writer for Shrinking. The executive producer, the showrunner, is Bill Lawrence, who created Ted Lasso, also created Scrubs and a few other shows. But he is the showrunner for Shrinking, and then it features Harrison Ford. And I think the first time I've ever seen him in any television show, and he's incredible. He's so good.
Oh yeah.
And then Jason Segel is kind of the main character, and from How I Met Your Mother, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, it is hilarious and it's very funny. It actually reminds me a lot of Ted Lasso. It kind of has a lot of the same feeling to it, a lot of the same kind of emotions and whatever. Not as positive as Ted Lasso is. It deals with some darker elements, more grief and kind of stuff like that. So it's not as positive as Ted Lasso, but it is still very funny, very well written, very real for the most part, and very enjoyable. And I highly recommend that you watch if you're going to watch. And there's one season out so far, and they've already confirmed it for a second season. And it is just such a good show.
My next recommendation, we're going to go a little bit away from soccer. We mentioned it earlier, but my recommendation is Shoresy. If you want some fucking fantastic one-liners, that is the show to go to. The basic premise is a small town in Canada is going to lose their hockey team if they don't win the championship. And this brash young player / coach comes in and basically guarantees a win for the championship to keep the team around. And it's just a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be just like average, but it is fantastic.
Yeah. Because the character's so very... Because the character comes from Letterkenny.
Right.
And is very one-dimensional, just kind of a one-liner joke character in Letterkenny. And I had no idea how they were going to build a show around this guy. I didn't think they would be able to. Because he gets no... You don't ever even see his face in Letterkenny, because it's played by the same guy that plays Wayne in Letterkenny and also plays Shorzy. With kind of a falsetto voice. So I didn't think there was any chance to be as good. And I was so impressed. They really develop his character. They really give him some depth. It is very funny, very well written, very irreverent. Just in general, very good show. I second that recommendation very much. My other recommendation that I would say, and another one of my favorite shows, which is also finished now, technically, is The Expanse.
Oh yeah,
if you haven't watched The Expanse, it's on Amazon Prime. Because it started out on Sci-Fi.
Is talking about.
Right, and it started out on Sci-Fi, and then they canceled it, and Amazon picked it up. Sci-Fi canceled it after season 3. Amazon picked it up and went through season 6, which covers books 1 through 5, and so also, or 1 through 6, and so I'll also throw in, if you are looking for a book series to read, The Expanse books are some of the best books that I've ever read. Or you can get the book on tape, and they're narrated by a guy named Jefferson Mays, who is a professional voice actor, Hollywood actor, stage actor, and he does an incredible job narrating his books. So if you don't want to just read, or if you're driving and you want something to listen to, heartily recommend The Expanse books. They're incredible. They're very well written. But the show is also, like you said, it's the best sci-fi nobody's talking about. It's notable because, so often when you get these shows in space, they have warp speed and they have whatever, and they can go place to place instantaneously. And a big part of The Expanse is the fact that space is big and it takes a long, long time to get anywhere. And, your ability to travel through space is very much modified by what you can take with you to go places. And so, how much fuel you can carry to use to get where you need to go. And so they stick to a lot of the space aspects very realistically. And I love that about the show, because if you fire something into space, like if you fire a bullet, it's just going to keep going. And they kind of get into that sort of thing. And I don't know, just in general, it's a very good show, very well written, a lot of good character development, a lot of interesting characters. Amos from The Expanse is probably one of my favorite characters in anything ever. Amos is amazing. And the guy that plays him, Wes Chatham, is a really good actor. And he actually did a podcast with one of the writers of The Expanse books, Ty Frank, where they talked about the show and talked about the writing and talked about making it and all that stuff. And so it's you can watch the show and you can listen to them talk about it. You can read the books, and I definitely recommend that you read the books. So yeah, that's my other big recommendation is absolutely The Expanse if you're looking for a sci-fi show.
I don't know if you know this. I just pre-ordered The Expanse game. It's coming out on PS5 and Xbox and all that.
The Telltale game, yes.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that. I pre-ordered it as well. I'm and I love Kamina Drummer. She's a very fun character. She's a very interesting character, very well acted. And I'm excited about getting to play a game from her perspective in that universe. I think it'll be very interesting.
As we wrap up, I just want to say thank you for staying on with me. I know we ran basically double time, but I just want to say I do appreciate you staying with me. And do you have any projects you want to promote? Any socials? Where can people reach you if they want to? You don't have to give any of that out. I know some people are just private.
No, I mean, I not particularly anything that I'm working on right now. I'm always working on books that I'm writing, but I don't have anything that anybody can read at the moment. So, but maybe hopefully if we do The Expanse later on, maybe I'll have something, a book that I can promote at the time. But no, I really appreciate you having me on. And honestly, I feel like I almost had to like restrain myself because I could have talked the rest of this afternoon about Ted Lasso. It genuinely is one of my favorite shows of all time, and I was very excited to come on and talk about it, and I'm really glad that we did, and I was able to touch on a lot of this stuff. So yeah, I mean, I hope that you can edit it down. Feel free to cut whatever you need to out of my stuff so that people can actually won't get tired of it. But I'm delighted to have been here and talked about this because the more people I can get to learn about Ted Lasso and watch it, and the better.
Awesome. Well, we definitely appreciate you having you come on the show. Let me see. So TrimTv can be viewed as a visual medium on YouTube or as an audio-only experience anywhere you can stream podcasts. If you would ever like to be a guest host on the podcast, please contact me at trimtvpodcast@gmail.com. For the socials, the show social is TrimTv Podcast on basically all the socials. To be honest, I only really fuck with Instagram. And my personal Instagram is Josh. What is my Instagram? Josh TrimTv. So I can be reached there if you guys ever want to be on the podcast. We'll for sure do The Expanse, and I am sure we'll have a new show as well coming out soon too.
All right, guys, thank you for hanging out with us so far. We do have some spoilers we wanted to discuss in this week's episode of Ted Lasso. So, if you have not seen the show, me and Zach both recommend that you check it out. Check it out and let us know what you think. But anyway, you have about 5 more seconds of time to pause this and go watch Ted Lasso before we hit the spoilers section. So, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's dive into some spoilers.
Were there any spoilers you wanted to talk about, Zach, or we can certainly skip that section as well?
Manager of AFC Richmond, Ted Lasso.
Okay. All right. How y'all doing? Oh.
Yes, coach. You knew I told you. Look how coach.
Hey! If I don't hear silence, I'm going to start punching dicks.
1 second. Just throat got a little dry. Ooh, did not expect fizzy water there. Sorry.
Look at this twat. Fucking yank.
Okay, so hey, why don't we just jump right in? Anybody got any questions? Oh yeah, no, should have saw that coming.
Ted Lasso is very, very positive without being overly cheesy. There are no moments that are unrealistically positive. Oh, whatever. People still have conflicts. People still disagree. People don't like each other. But they're adults about it. And they do it in a funny way, and they do it very much in a generally positive way. And there's a lot of understanding given to why people do these things. Like I said, Jamie Tart starts off as a very arrogant, kind of unlikable character. And as the first season goes on, you get a lot of glimpses into why he's that way.
What you need to do is get yourself a time machine and go back to the moment when your mum was about to fuck a sad little man with no athletic talent, pull her off him, fly her to Argentina, and drop her onto Maradona's cock.
And he kind of breaks down those walls, and he talks about why he is the way he is. And then actually one of the most heartbreaking, disappointing moments is when he leaves the team during the first season, because it's like it finally feels like the team comes together, and then he leaves. And it's a very heartbreaking, very well done moment. But then at the end of the season, you see him again, and you actually get a visual, like immediate glimpse into why he is the way he is, and what's led him to being where he's at in his relationship with his father and whatever. And so it's just, I don't know, it's just such a well written, well acted, positive show that also will just make you laugh, and you should watch it. That's just my 1,000%. I think is you should watch it because it is so good. Yeah, I mean, so in general, like the spoilers are kind of more as far as like how the show develops. I mean, you know, when the entire first season is them trying to stay in the Premier League, and then they end with them getting relegated down to the Championship. And there's a whole funny thing about where the top level is the Premier League and the second level is the Championship, and that seems like it'd be backwards. And then they get into the third season, they talk about they're going to be playing, so the third season is they don't win the Premier League, it all ends, and they don't win the Premier League. And I actually enjoyed that fact. They don't end up winning the Premier League. They don't win it all. Because that is a very hard thing to do, especially when you're going up against the likes of Man City, Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, all these teams that have billions of dollars to spend to bring in the best players in the world. And they finished second. And it actually feels very reminiscent of, there was a team that actually was just relegated this year, Leicester City, in 2016, won the Premier League. And they'd just been promoted the season before. And it was unbelievable. I mean, it still was one of the biggest shocks in the sporting world in the last decade, easily, was when Leicester City won the Premier League. Because I think before the season, they were something like, I don't know, 1,000 to 1. I mean, like the odds, the betting odds against them winning the Premier League were insane. Because for the last 20 years or so, it's always been Man City, Man United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Tottenham. One of those teams have won the Premier League because they have so much money to spend. And so, but getting back, like I like that the show didn't end with them winning the Premier League, but they still made the Champions League. They talk about the second tier of English football is the Championship, and then but if you do really good in the Premier League, you go to the Champions League, and so I enjoyed that aspect of like they kind of joke around about that a little bit, but I like that a lot of the show is very much about overcoming that adversity, of overcoming whatever, he comes in and he doesn't immediately fix everything. It's not immediately like a happy, like they go down, and that's okay because, Rebecca realizes now that let's do better. Let's be better than Rupert. Let's be, whatever.
Losing sucks, even if you want to.
Yeah, losing. And I will say that I love, because the whole thing about Ted is when he's doing the interview with Trent Crimm, he says, "I don't care about the wins and losses. I don't." And he genuinely doesn't. He doesn't care. It does not matter to him. But later on, he's talking to Beard, and Beard says, like, no, it does matter. Especially for these guys, because this is their livelihood. They are making a living playing this game. And if you're in the Championship, you're getting paid less money than you're getting in the Premier League. Because the team is making less money, so it's not going to be able to pay you as much. And in fact, actually, so when a team goes down, this is a little interesting tidbit. When a team is demoted from the Premier League to the Championship, they actually get a one-time bonus that gets paid to them because they have all these players that were getting paid Premier League, money. They're now going to be in the Championship, and if they're, the team doesn't go insolvent because it's not making as much money, they give them a bonus to pay to these players to make sure they can still get paid until the team can either sell them or make it back up to the Premier League or whatever. So there is kind of that aspect of like, this matters to these guys because this is their livelihood, and this is so. I like that they get into the fact that like the Ted Lasso way is good, as like your point about coaching and how that we wish we had more coaches like Ted Lasso, especially for amateur sports, and kids sports, because it should be so much more about developing these people and leading to them being the best version of themselves that they can be. But as Beer points out, like when it's the professional level, like the Ted Lasso way is good and is important, but also we got to recognize that winning is important, and that matters to the fans, to the players themselves, to the team, to the ownership, whatever. That matters as well. And let's, as much as positivity is good, we've also got to focus on we have to have positive results, and not just whatever. So, so I like that there's kind of, they have to overcome this adversity of the team loses to start with and then comes down and isn't immediately successful at the lower level and then fights their way back up and then goes through the entire third season of the Premier League season, and they're constantly fighting for one of the top places. And, eventually they have a chance to win the league, and they win the game that they need to win. But unfortunately, Man City's too good, and Man City wins, and so they win the league. And it's, it's this whole thing. But that they do this really good job of, like, making it about kind of the journey rather than the ultimate destination.
Awesome. And then, so I have one more spoiler. So let me pick your soccer brain. They keep referring to Nate as like the soccer tactician genius. Were they full of shit, or like was he actually like a decent tactician? Because in the show, it didn't really come across that well beyond them just being like, "Oh, you're so brilliant as this wonderful tactician."
So they keep talking about the fact that, and I will say that, like, a manager's tactics definitely have a big impact on, manager's tactics, his training, whatever, has a big impact on what happens. But, and Ted Lasso talks about this, I think in the second season, is that, like, or no, actually in the first season, he's talking to his son, and he says basically that, like, once they're on the field, like, I have to get them as ready as I can get them. And then once they're on the field, it's up to them what happens. And there's only so much I can do. And there's this interesting, if you look at the different sports, like baseball, a big thing is that, like the manager's important for the clubhouse in baseball. He's important for keeping the players cohesive, keeping everybody happy, deciding playing time, whatever. But once it comes to what's happening on the field, there's not a lot that the manager can do in baseball. It's up to the players. It's up to the pitcher, the batter, whatever. It's up to the players what happens. And then you've got American football where the coach is calling the plays and the coach is deciding how they run the offense. And so he is having a direct impact on every single play because he's the one who's calling out what should be happening and what his team should be doing. And so the coach in American football has a much more direct impact on what is happening on the field. And you got hockey where it's kind of a mix. And soccer's a lot like hockey, where it's like the coach can give you tactics, he can give you plays, he can give you, we should enter the zone this way. We should, work on passing more. We should dump and chase versus, a controlled entry versus whatever. A soccer manager is a lot like that, where it's, I can give you the tactics. I can say we should play this style. We should play a 4-5-1 or a 4-4-2 or a 4-3-3 or a 3-5-2 or whatever. And he can change those tactics for the game based on who they're playing and whatever. But once they're on the field, a lot of what happens out there is going to be very much based off of the players that are out there and what they can do and what they can manage. And you can have, like, with set pieces, where they call the trick plays and whatever, that can have somewhat of an impact. But the tactics are important, but it's about the player's ability to execute them. And so you don't get to see a lot of Nate really managing, being a gaffer, a Premier League gaffer. You don't get to see a whole lot of that. So it's kind of hard to judge whether or not he's actually a genius. He is a genius. I will say that he's a genius compared to Ted Lasso, who knows nothing about football, English football, world football. He's a genius compared to him because he's been around the game his whole life. And Ted Lasso says as much. He's forgotten more about soccer than I'll ever know because he's been around the game his whole life, and I haven't. And right. He does come up with some solid ideas. I will say that when Tottenham ties it up and they're towards the end of the game, was not the time to park. I wouldn't have parked the bus there, with my understanding of tactics and football and whatever. Because so the way that the FA Cup works is if they tied, if they'd drawn, I think at that stage they weren't, because for the first several rounds, if you draw, you play another game. You have another game later, so a replay, and then the last two for the semifinal and the final. If you draw, then you have extra time, and then you have a shootout. And I think that the Tottenham game was the quarterfinal, I believe. And so if they tied with Tottenham, they would have played another game. And so at that point, Tottenham probably would not have been playing very aggressively, because Tottenham's idea is that if we play again, we'll beat them. It's no problem. We're better than them. They scored first because Jamie scored a fluke goal, which that goal that Jamie scored against Tottenham was absolutely the goalie being way too far out. The goalie played that so badly. You should never, a player should never score on a free kick from that far out. There's no excuse for that to happen. 1,000% that goal was on the goal. But so I wouldn't have parked the bus there. It worked out for them. I don't know if that was really the right call for him to make, but that's what they did. It worked out, so great. Beyond that, you just don't get to see a lot of what he does or what he believes they should do. They talk about, he introduces the false nine, and it ends up working for them, and they end up winning even after he leaves. But, I mean, a lot, like, when Ted Lasso has this big reveal about the passing, and he talks about it's total football.
You turn those fans upside down because we're fucking doing this. We're going to drill it, we're going to train it, and then in a couple of months, we're taking total football to the fucking pitch.
Well, no, actually, we're going to do it this Saturday against Arsenal.
Well, that's fucking mental.
No.
And now it's, and Rupert calls it in the last episode, it's tiki-taka. That's what I know it as, is tiki-taka. It's pass. And it's very famous in Spanish football, because the Spanish national team has run it forever, and Barcelona, Pep Guardiola ran it at Barcelona. And that's kind of really where it took off lately. And so, a lot of kind of the things that are revealed as like these big, like, oh my God, like moments are really relatively normal stuff in football, in soccer. It's stuff that aren't, like, the false nine is a formation that teams run a lot, where you kind of have the striker drop back, and a lot of times what you'll see a 4-3-3. So you have 4 defenders, 3 midfielders, and 3 people up front, and you'll have 2 guys on the wing, and then you'll have, a lot of times you either have 2 guys on the wing and you'll have a striker close to goal, or you run 4-3-3 with the false nine, where you have 2 wingers, and then you have an attacking kind of midfielder. He's playing more towards the middle of the field, and also makes runs into the box and tries, but also tries to feed the wingers. And so this is kind of normal stuff. So the fact that he comes up with these ideas aren't necessarily indications of genius.
Gotcha.
So really all you have to go off of him being a genius is the other people saying that he is. But that also ties into the fact that you don't see a lot of West Ham play. You don't see a lot of kind of how they work and whatever. So they don't really give you a chance to see whether he's a genius or not. But also, it's debatable how much him being a genius or not being a genius really works. Because I mean, Pep Guardiola has been a really good manager that's won a lot of games, but he's also managed Barcelona and Man City, who are 2 of the highest spending teams in football, who have also won without him being the manager. So yeah, he's a great manager, and his players love him, and he undoubtedly has won a lot of games, helped win his team win a lot of games. But it also helps that his teams that he manages for spend lots and lots of money and bring in some of the best players in the world. And so that is actually probably where a manager has more of an impact in soccer, is identifying the right players to play in the right system. And like going out and getting those players, because the manager a lot of times is the one who's buying the players, is responsible. Like he'll have a director of scouting that will say, hey, we've seen this guy and he's really good and I think you should go to him or whatever. But he's the one that decides what players fit his system and who he needs to go get and, you know, what he can do with them. And so that's kind of more of where like Pep's genius is. And I would guess that may be more of where Nate's genius, such as it is, might be, is that identifying the right players in his system and setting his system up so that they have the best chance of success on the field.
Awesome. I thank you for that explanation. That definitely helps repaint my picture of Nate a little, because I am a Nate hater a little bit, just a little.
All right, let's start closing things up. But before we do that, I do want us to finish up by talking about the ending of Ted Lasso. I thought it was pretty good. For the most part, everybody gets the happy ending that you want to see. So what are your thoughts on that, Zach?
Yes. And Ted gets to go home and to be with his family, which is clearly very important to him. And they talk about, like, and they definitely very much kind of lean into the, well, we don't want him to leave and let's keep him here and so on and so forth. And then he still goes home. And that's very much okay, because it's like, this is important to him. And sometimes you've got to give up things that you love. You've got to make a sacrifice sometimes. And this is his sacrifice so that he can go home and see his son grow up and be with his family and, you know, whatever, and be back home. And so, you know, I definitely think that they ended the series well. Well, they ended the third season as well as they could have. They set it up for the possibility of there being a spinoff, and there have already been hints that there could be a spinoff. Apple TV tweeted out a picture of Roy Kent and Coach Beard and Nate standing together, and said something about I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like possibilities or you know, whatever. And then Nick Mohammed quote tweeted that with like a lip sealed thing, zipper over the lips, which, you know, I took to mean that they're already at least talking about developing those three, you know, and maybe just the show, maybe kind of an ensemble show of the entire team as a spinoff, which I would love to see, because as much as I love Ted Lasso, the character and Jason Sudeikis and whatever, as much as I loved his positivity and his humor and all of that, there's absolutely still a show without him if they want there to be. You know, there are so many characters that can carry on a show. You know, Roy Kent. I would watch a TV show about just Roy Kent living his life.
Fucking friendly. Friendly is a pretend match. This is a pretend conversation. You're a pretend person with a pretend job, and I'm having a really hard time pretending to give a shit.
Because Brett Goldstein is such a good actor, and his character is so well written, and is so funny and is so well developed that I would happily watch that. I'd watch a character, you know, watch a show just about Samo Basanya, you know, being a professional soccer player, and the trials and tribulations that go with that. You know, so there's very much still a show here to be done if they want there to be, and it seems like they do, and it seems like that's going to be a possibility, and I'm excited about that. But I did think that Ted Lasso specifically, his arc got well wrapped up, and very much the third season, you know, they talk about the fact that there's less Ted Lasso in the third season. You get less of his character, you get less of his development, and it's much more about the team as a whole. And they specifically referenced that, where they said, like, you know, less is more, and so on. It was never Trick Krim finishes his book and he gives Ted Lasso the draft of it to read and approve and whatever. And Ted reads it and he says, it's great, I loved it. And he says, change the title, because it's like The Lasso Away or whatever. And he says, change the title because it was never about me. And that's the whole kind of theme. It was never about me. It was about all these other people. And it was about you, whatever. And so it definitely feels like they're saying, like, you know, this show will continue without Ted Lasso, because he's as important as he is, as much as the show's named after him, you know, it's not all about him.
It certainly isn't all about him, and our show isn't all about us. Thank you for listening. That is all we have right now for the Ted Lasso experience. Of course, you can always get in on the conversation or hit me up, and I'd love to talk about your favorite TV shows as well. So join me in one more goodbye to the lovely Ted Lasso for now, and hopefully we'll get more from this world soon. Goodbye, Ted Lasso.
Goodbye, Ted. I owe you and this show so much, so thank you, Ted.
Genuinely, it makes me a bit...
See you later, Ted.
Adios, amigo.
Bye, Ted.
Stop talking, change the subject.
Boss don't want to talk about it yet.
I'm right there with you. Goodbye, Ted.
Goodbye, Ted. Love you.
It's been amazing.
Goodbye, Ted.
It was great knowing you, wanker.
Getting to work with y'all for these last 3 years, I mean, it's truly been one of the greatest experiences of my life. I'm just so gosh damn proud to be a part of this team.